This is Recruiting Roundtable, where we talk to HR and talent acquisition leaders about thoughtful topics in the world of recruiting. For today's discussion, we're going to be talking about talent retention. And with so much movement happening in tech, retaining talent can be one of the most important aspects of creating a strong, vibrant, and engaged workforce. We have an amazing panel this week. Joining us are Pamela Golden, VP People at Panther, and Amanda Davenport, Director of Talent Acquisition at Submittable. Pamela, Amanda, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, Sean.
Yes. So let's start with some intros. Please briefly describe, introduce yourself, discuss your role, and just a little bit about your company. Let's start with Amanda.
Okay. Well, I'm Amanda Davenport, Director of TA at Submittable. Submittable is a social impact company. We really focus on grants management software. It's kind of like our bread and butter right now, but we're also in the process of rolling out an employee engagement platform that's designed to really kind of facilitate and take corporation and organizations, corporate social responsibility efforts and impacts to the next level. I've been with Submittable for just about 2 years. And yeah, I oversee our TA process, hiring strategy, talent strategy, and then I am also our DEIB practitioner and also am helping kind of manage our total rewards and compensation philosophies.
Great. Thanks, man. Wearing lots of hats. Love it.
Yep.
Pamela?
Thanks. So I'm Pamela Golden. I'm the VP of People at Panther. Panther is a Series B cybersecurity SaaS company. We work in the SIM space, so helping security analysts, helping practitioners secure their environment. So I have been at Panther for actually a little over 2 years. And in addition to overseeing the end-to-end people function, I also am the executive sponsor for our DEI Council, as well as our Panther Pride LGBTQIA+ ERG.
Great. All right. Well, it sounds like we're going to have to talk about some diversity topics today for sure. We have the right people in the room. My name is Sean Huynh. I'm Managing Director at Rocket. We have an AI powered tool that enables our recruiters to engage 5 times as many candidates in half the time and source for really complex job requirements using highly granular and industry-specific filters. We're a trusted partner for over 500 companies, with 62% of our candidates being accepted by our clients for a first interview. All right. So let's talk about talent retention. Let's start there. That's the topic of this show. Can you briefly explain, in your own words, what talent retention is and why it's so crucial for companies in general, and in particular your company in today's day and age? Let's start with Pamela.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So for me, thinking about talent retention isn't just about minimizing attrition. It's really about recognizing that employees bring distinct capabilities, distinct experiences, unique perspectives. The people who work at Panther are not interchangeable commodities. They're unique individuals. And so this is crucial for companies. And I would say, as you mentioned right now, particularly tech companies, because when you're thinking about complex products, context matters. It's really critical. When you lose key players, you lose history about how decisions were made, how the product is intended to operate, what our customers were saying that led us to modify certain things about the product. Mm-hmm. So retaining those employees with the experiences, capabilities, and context is really critical for longer term business success.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a panel here, we have like a cybersecurity company, Panther, and that's very, very technical product, very specific. And then we have Submittable, which is a very, I would say, like niche product. I don't know if Amanda, you want to corroborate that description, but like in a grants management platform, right? It has very specific domain expertise. So love to get your feedback, Amanda, on the talent retention piece.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would echo everything that Pamela mentioned. For us, we definitely have a a different technical requirement, but for really making the product successful and maximizing adoption of it, there's a ton of just different nuanced use cases that we have to be aware of, and that's for like a product life cycle standpoint, who our customers are, why they are buying it, what they are solving, and what they're solving for in the city of Minnesota is going to be completely different than what they're solving in the city of Iowa. And so that really does require a lot of specialty knowledge. I think also, from an operational standpoint, a lot of people also will talk about employee retention when they're talking about talent retention. And I really love what Pamela said about employees not just being interchangeable commodities. You can't run your organization without the people, and having a strong retention strategy in place just really helps make sure that you are able to stay consistent, that you can continue to invest in high performing teams. There's also an element of I think one of the things we don't talk a lot about from a retention standpoint is also kind of that controlled churn. You hear a lot about like, oh, you want all of your employees to stay. And I don't think we talk enough about like the strategy behind, we want the good ones to stay, and what does that look like, and how do we figure out how to make sure we hire good ones, and then what are we putting in place to make sure that the high performing teams are staying and have an environment that they want to continue to be successful in.
So on that topic, and maybe we'll stick with you, Amanda, then we'll go to Pamela after, is how do you create a work environment that makes people want to stick around? Like, well, what's Submittable doing that makes people want to stay?
Yeah. For me, I feel like there's always like different tiers, pillars, buckets, whatever you want to call it, on how you go about implementing and executing that type of strategy. At the operational level, you got to have people that care a lot about your total rewards programs, that are making them competitive, that are providing clear paths for advancement, career development, that you're getting transparent communication from the executive staff. But at the end of the day, like, it really comes back to treating your employees like humans. One of the things that I really love about the startup space is that equity is so often part of that compensation package. Submittable is also a public benefits corporation, which means that we treat all of our employees as key stakeholders and owners within the organization, with the same level of importance that we do with the board. And so that really ties into the need to make sure that we're communicating effectively and transparently, and that everybody knows like what the mission and the direction of the organization is. I think that that's a huge part of that. Outside of that, you need to have some cool programs that really like embrace the humanity of your staff. And one of the things that I really love about Submittable is the way that we encourage connections between the company and the local community, and try to partner that into things that are company sponsored events. Like we do virtual yoga a few times a year as part of our wellness program, with one of the local yoga studios that one of our employees happens to also teach at on the weekends. And I just think that that is just like a really cool way of making connection and community, and making it less about like your day job.
That's great. And Pamela, what's Panther doing in that regard?
Yeah, well, I think one key theme that Amanda mentioned that I want to pick up on and amplify is this concept of transparency. And for me, transparency, authenticity are absolutely critical. So when I talk about being authentic, for me, that's about, you have to know your values. Like, really, what are your values? How do you behave? Not just what's on your website. You have to center those in all people processes, particularly in hiring, right? So that people know what they're signing up for. For me, when talent is staying, it's an active choice. People are opting in every day to what you offer as an employer. They're opting in to be a part of the team. They're opting into your mission, right? And so being really authentic about what this team is, what they stand for, who they are, what the mission is really critical. And when it comes to transparency, being clear at every step of the hiring process, throughout onboarding, and when people are settling in, when you're doing performance reviews, any part of the employee life cycle, being transparent about these are the values, this is how we're thinking about what it means to work here, I think is absolutely critical for creating a work environment that makes people want to stick around, because not every company is right for every individual. So it's a matter of finding that right fit where the values really resonate, where the mission feels meaningful, and where you find a community where you can show up as your best self and do work that you feel like you're having an impact and you feel like you're growing and you're getting something out of the experience, not just giving something to the company. So that, for me, like having that clarity in your culture and your values is absolutely essential. And then once people are in the door, yeah, building community with intention. So we have a culture club, and we have a sort of standard event that we call First Fridays. And we vary up what sort of activities that we do at that First Friday. And we try to make it appealing for many different kinds of people. Some folks are gregarious and outgoing, and they want to really engage and connect with people in this remote first context that Panther operates in. Whereas other people want to feel like they're a part of the community, but maybe are a little bit more reserved and want to watch and observe. And so we do, everything from sort of like the Great Panther Bake Off, where we had a pie bracket and selected winning pies, and then a group of us were baking pies and talking about it together, to much more interactive, like code names online, whatever it might be for cities, because we do have little sort of clusters and centers of gravity. We encourage people who are co-located to come together, even if you aren't working on the same team. But we have sort of holiday dinners that we support. We did a number of community engagement volunteering events in the June timeframe where people were coming together and volunteering, engaging with their communities. And that was a great way to spend time and reinforce, again, the culture, what it means to be a part of Panther.
I think the thing I've occurred consistently from both of you is the community aspect, right? Just giving back to the community and being part of the community and creating that connectivity. I think that's super important. Let's talk about when you're interviewing candidates and hiring them. Obviously, you're trying to interview for technical or technical requirements and fit, obviously, but there's also that culture piece as well. Are there certain things that you're during the hiring process you're looking for from a candidate that maybe would make you think that, hey, this candidate would be a great fit here and would stay long term? Maybe we'll start with Amanda on that one.
Yeah. Probably unpopular opinion, but in the screening process, actually like to go pretty deep and talk about our challenges up front, because I think that a lot of times that's where you kind of give the candidate the ability to have ownership and control of whether or not they want to continue to go through the interview process. So part of that is we provide pretty in-depth interview prep documents that include like everybody that you're going to meet, how to find them and stalk them online, what your time investment is going to be. There's so much swirling around right now about like how many interviews is too many, and should we just get rid of resumes altogether? And so as people subscribe to different levels of effort that they're willing to put in to the interview process, I like to arm them with that up front. Our tech interviews are lengthy and grueling, and like a senior dev is probably going to spend 6 hours interviewing all in all. And so I like to tell them that up front. I also like to talk about some of the challenges that we're having and what we're looking to solve. And that, I think, is a way that's been successful for us to kind of frame our interview practices, because it helps us discern this, but more often than not, the candidate discern whether or not they think that it's going to be a good fit for them as well. If you get somebody who really loves a good process and finds out that like we don't have a super robust ticketing system when it comes to how we prioritize bugs, then maybe the gap is we want you to build it, but if that's not something that is going to fill your cup, you're just going to be really irritated. And so let's kind of, how do I proactively figure out what all of your cons are, get that out of the way first, and then we dig into more of the like, this is what we know like success needs to look like.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. And Pamela, what about you?
Yeah, I would. I'm going to go back to transparency, and Amanda was just talking about that, right? Be transparent about what are the challenges. So again, like thinking about it as we want candidates to opt in, so we want to be really clear. I always think of an interview as an opportunity for the candidate to show up at their absolute best. We want to set them up for success because that's how we want people to show up every day when they're working with us. So I think everyone who's ever been a recruiter has like their go-to question, their favorite thing. I always love to ask people, what are your must-haves and what are your deal breakers? So getting people to be really explicit about what they need, and then we can say, great, here's how we align with that, or here's what we don't have that you mentioned. Because there needs to be alignment between what the individual needs, where that individual can be most successful, and what your organization offers as an employer, as a company, as an entity. That strong alignment is critical for enabling long-term talent retention. I mean, the one example is, I've mentioned before, we're remote first. That is great for some people. That is not great for everyone. Some people really prefer that in-person experience, which is great, appropriate. It just means they're probably going to be less excited about an opportunity at Panther than they are about a place that has an in-office culture.
So I'm just curious because I've worked with hundreds of clients, and I have differing opinions. But do you think past tenure is an indicator for future tenure? Example: my average tenure is 5 years. I've worked at 3 companies for 5 years each. I've had a 15-year career. Does that mean that if I work at Panther or Submittable, I'm going to stay there for 5 years? What are your thoughts on that? Pamela, you want to just answer that?
Yeah, I'll dive into that. That's a spicy one. I like it. I think for me, it's almost the opposite, where if a candidate hasn't found the right home for them, and I see, say, over a 15-year career, I see 12 different workplaces, that for me suggests this person doesn't know how to understand and identify that alignment between what they need and what an employer has to offer. Right. So I think I'm not looking for it's great, Sean, you've obviously you've dialed it in, what works for you. Right. I'm not looking for someone who necessarily has always got 5 to 7 years at a company, because there can be very compelling reasons to leave within 1 year or 2 years. Right. What I think is something that I always look for when I'm talking with candidates and looking to understand their background is, have they been at a place long enough to demonstrate progression? And I don't even think of it as a ladder where you're climbing up levels. I think of it as a jungle gym where you're moving around, you're acquiring new skills, you're acquiring new capabilities. Maybe you go up, maybe you go sideways. Right? But you're moving, you're expanding your capabilities, you're expanding your scope, your impact on that company by acquiring new skills and applying them in new ways.
Interesting. Amanda?
Yes, that's so good. My short answer is it depends. But just like Pamela is saying, that progression piece is something that I think is so important. We are located in the greater Seattle area, and so we're competing with Microsoft, we're in Amazon, and
Very competitive out there.
yeah. And we have a lot of alumni from those companies, and so that gives us some really good insight into like the different levels in the average promotion track and things like that. And so I would say that, like there are some things where I have questions if I see, I'm just going to be super, super specific here. If I see someone was at Amazon for less than 2 years, I have questions about that. And it's not like a deal breaker one way or the other. It's just like what happened there? Because I know that you have to stay at Amazon for 2 years in order to get that big hiring bonus.
Mm-hmm.
If you, for example, I'm just picking on Amazon here, so hopefully that's okay. But if you also, kind of on the flip side of the coin, see someone that's been at Amazon for 7 years and they don't have a significant level progression or job title change, that also suggests to me maybe a high performer, but not with the level of agility and adaptability that will make you successful in a startup.
Mm-hmm.
At least not ours. And so I have questions about that. Again, nothing is necessarily a deal breaker, because there's totally legitimate reasons, and it's important to figure that out when you're talking with people. But like there are some things where I do have like some situational knowledge baked in that, let's be fair, I have to be really careful of, because we don't want to encourage making biased decisions just by looking at somebody's career history and not understanding all of the context behind it. But it does help me kind of drive conversations and ask specific questions to really get at, kind of what Pamela was saying, like, have you figured out what works well for you and what you're looking for in a career? And if not, why? And what has your career trajectory looked like? And can you tell me about it? Can you tell me that story?
Mm-hmm.
I think another one that a lot of people get hung up on, which is a bummer, because there's a lot of really good talent out there that has this experience, is something that looks hoppy from like startup to startup to startup.
Yep.
Some people just really love like the high risk, high reward thrill of going into different startups and seeing what lands, or like having a really explosive impact up front and then moving on to the next thing. And those people are really valuable because that's where you get a lot of quick movement.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the early stages. And so there are people that are just attracted to those very early stage startups that end up getting like sold off or acquired, and like that's their sweet spot. You just got to know if that's a skill that you're looking for or not.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting question. I kind of threw a curveball. I don't think that was on the list of questions, but I felt it was appropriate to ask. I've worked with so many. I've done a lot of software engineering roles in particular. So I've worked with a lot of like founders, VPs of engineering, and the number one consistent thing that I've been told around tenure is, has this engineer lived with their mistakes? That's what they want to know. They want to know, did they come in, write a bunch of code, and break something and then stay along long enough to figure out what they broke and fix it? Or they come in, write a bunch of code, and then left before they even realized how much value they drove, right? And I think that's the main point on the tenure piece that we like, especially as an agency, we hear from our clients. I know everyone has a different opinion, but I think I tend to agree with that, right? Like, you gotta stay places for a bit, live with your mistakes. Not everyone's gonna be perfect. If you live through them, that makes you stronger, and gives you more value to the next employer. Okay, so let's talk about internal promotions, because I think that's a big part of talent retention. I'm gonna start with Pamela because we had a really interesting conversation. Pamela, you mentioned that Panther does a great job of moving people around within the organization. You've had people go from go to market to product, from CS to marketing, from support to engineering. Love to hear kind of how you foster that those discussions internally and help people within your organization move within departments.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Sean. Appreciate it. So we're pretty small. We're 110 people. We don't have really like robust, formally documented career paths by like role and level. It's much more about encouraging consistent, open, honest conversation around what do you value as an employee? What do you value? Where do you want to have impact? What capabilities do you want to acquire? And let's be honest, in a startup, there's always more work to be done than there are people to do it. So that creates opportunity. So what we've seen is that people will start to dip a toe in one area with the encouragement of their manager. Oh, this is a problem that excites you. Okay, well, let's find a way to connect you with someone who's working on that problem right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that will help give people an opportunity to get exposure to a team, build a brand, build a connection, and then they're the first person who is maybe considered when an opportunity comes up. Of course, we want to build a really diverse talent marketplace. So we're always thinking about how do we bring in external talent, but we're equally thinking about how do we engage internal talent as well, recognizing that people who are experienced with our, as you have mentioned, highly technical and complex product bring a unique value proposition when they're moving around relative to hiring someone externally.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've had great success in particular from helping people move from our customer support team into engineering because they're very technical. They know the product backwards and forwards. That's really natural. Into SE positions because they're already familiar with our customers. They know how to engage with customers, and they know the problems that customers encounter. They're able to paint a picture when they're meeting with prospects about how the product is used in real life. So ultimately, if you want to create a culture of internal mobility, you have to be intentional about keeping it top of mind, talking with managers about the importance of career conversations, and holding up examples and saying, look, this team is an exporter of talent, and that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the biggest risk is that managers recognize my team has a lot to do, and they get stressed about the idea of, losing someone. That's such a terrible mindset. Like, if someone is transferring internally, you're not losing them because they're staying in the company, they're growing. It's a win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that managers have that mindset of like, we are accelerating this person's growth and we are helping out my teammate in another part of the organization. And this sets such a beautiful standard for the people who are staying on the team to say like, oh, okay, my manager was really supportive of that person growing. Because if you're not growing, you're going. That's what I always
Yep.
tell our managers.
Absolutely. Amanda, what about Submittable? Do you see a lot of that intercompany people moving within departments, or are mostly people staying in their defined lanes?
I think it's picking up. One thing I just real quickly, Pamela, I feel like that's such a good call out on that mindset with managers. I think they get so so often they get wrapped around the axle of like, I'm losing headcount, and they don't realize what a win it is to have somebody like kind of graduate from your team to another team, particularly when there's such a functional differentiation, because the situational and operational awareness that that person is going to bring to that new team, you're not going to get that from an outside hire. And so it just really creates a lot of seamless, like cross functionality that is really, really cool to see get built. Career development is something that is super important to all of the staff at Submittable. We see that consistently through our engagement surveys. And so we are, one of our big lifts for 2024 is building out job levels, job families, career paths, and core competencies around those different levels. And so I'm excited for us to see that. I think this year, this year we had a lot of promotions. For a company of 20 or of 220-ish, we saw somewhere around, I want to say, don't quote me, but like around 30. And just through like the growth of our sales team, through promoting through our software team. We saw some lateral movement as well. We actually had somebody kind of go like the opposite direction, where they were on the software dev team and then moved into a solution engineering role. And I thought that was such a cool shift. And just kind of as we like grow and mature and find like more crossover in different functions, seeing people kind of naturally follow that is really cool. I think that the one thing that I consistently tell employees when they are looking to like, they're getting antsy because they want something else, is just like this concept of like really owning your like career and like your career trajectory. And so I think that like concept of ownership is something that's like a consistent value across the board for people that work at Submittable, and the people that have that level of ownership, whether it's in a deliverable that they have to the business or in the ownership that they have to themselves in their own professional development. Those are the people that we see really succeed and grow in all sorts of different ways.
So I've heard twice now engineers go into sales and like sales engineering roles or solution engineering roles, which is great. I think I mentioned potentially to both of you on our pre-show call that one of the strategies a former company I had was to turn engineers into actual like account executives. And once the engineers kind of got over the mental hurdle that, oh my gosh, I'm a salesperson, they ended up being some of the top salespeople, especially when you're selling something technical. If you have a technical person selling a technical product or service to another technical buyer, magic happens. So there's a tip out there for anyone listening or any software engineers out there. Don't be afraid to like get into sales. It's there's nothing wrong with it. In terms of I have two more questions and then we'll wrap for the day. One is going to be on how to gather feedback, and I want to touch on the diversity piece since we have great people for that. So gathering employee feedback and surveys. I know, Amanda, you touched on this a little bit. To improve your retention rates, is that something that you're actively doing, like soliciting feedback from your employees? And then when you get that feedback, how do you typically action on it? Maybe we'll start with Pamela.
Yeah, thanks. So definitely engagement surveys. We also do onboarding surveys. We want to understand people's experiences they're coming in, and exit surveys, of course. So those are really rich data sets to help us understand employee experience, anything that we're missing, any trends we're seeing around retention. And definitely, we think ERGs are another critical resource for funneling feedback and on behalf of historically underrepresented communities in tech in particular. So I actually have a DEI council meeting today, and that's one of the things that we typically discuss: what's top of mind in your community, what are the needs that you're seeing right now. We have executive office hours. This goes back to that element of transparency, but also ensuring that our executives are really accessible for folks. And I do a 6-month check-in with every new employee. And a big part of that is understanding their experience, also making sure that there's just sort of a friendly face in HR. So they know they can reach out to me, they can talk to me, they can funnel feedback through me. So giving many different outlets for people to provide feedback, both anonymously and in person, it's super, super important. And then in terms of actually responding to that feedback, a lot of times you have to understand what is the root cause, right? If you're hearing some consistent feedback, making sure that you're addressing the problem in a way that doesn't feel like a knee-jerk reaction, but it feels like there's something meaningful you're changing. So a really straightforward example, when I first got to Panther, there had never been a really robust, structured performance review process. There'd been a couple of ad hoc reviews that were done. And so just to get a lay of the land, I put out just a quick engagement survey. And it was so clear to me that there was this huge demand for feedback. So we, in true startup fashion, we accelerated the timeline to have performance reviews. And instead of saying, let's get a perfectly planned, formatted process, it's like, okay, let's do this now, right? What can we make happen in 8 weeks that's going to have really high ROI for a minimal lift. And then afterwards, checking in with managers and saying, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What did you like? What did you not like? And just continually evolving that. So I think listening to folks in terms of what they're saying in any outlet, figuring out the root cause, trying to notch a quick win, and then iterating around that, consistently making things better instead of waiting for perfection.
Yeah, love that. Amanda?
Yeah. I mean, everything that Pamela said. We do our candidate experience surveys, and we report those metrics to the executive staff. The comments are way more helpful in those than just like the overall rating. But we also do onboarding surveys. We have our 30, 60, 90 check-ins. We do our pull surveys, and then we also have our engagement surveys. I think one of the things that we lead with our staff is like the engagement survey is the most important one for you to take the time to respond to, because they get that survey fatigue is real and it's a thing. And we need the feedback to be valuable. But one of the things that I really appreciate about the data that we do with them is, we have a committee as part of our people ops team where we go through all of that. We report the like the results to the executive staff, and we'll say, hey, like this is where we were, quarter over quarter, this is where we're trending, or yikes, you guys tanked, and like your approval ratings went down significantly, like we got to dig into that and figure it out. But then the CEO actually gets up and reports on all of those findings as well in our all hands meetings, and talks about them, with all of us. And so that's that level of transparency and ownership of like, hey, this is what you're saying, this is, like our plan to action, and then putting the responsibility on whichever party is needing to be addressed, is kind of where we see that getting put into action. And it's been cool to track that over the last several quarters and see some really good positive trending.
Well, that's been thank you so much for those insights, Amanda and Pamela. I think time's up. We went through this, and we had a really great time. We really appreciate both of you for your insights. This is an amazing episode. I think my biggest takeaway is transparency is so important to talent retention. I think that was the running theme. But again, thank you so much for joining and your insights. We hope to stay in touch. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
All right.
Sean.
Bye, everyone.